All right, Algebra 2, we're going to start graphing these trig functions, So we're going to start graphing the trig functions, and the first one we're going to start off with is the sine function. So again, if you notice what I wrote up here, I redid the unit circle, only I'm just using those 4, 5 points, okay? So I went 0, which is at 1, 0, 90, which is pi halves. And again, we're converting these to radians, so we're multiplied this by pi over 180. So that's how I got the pi halves. It's at 0, 1, 180, which is at pi, 270, which is at 3 pi halves, 360, which is at 2 pi. One complete revolution of this is to 2 pi. They'd be like, graph everything, do one complete all the way to 2 pi. So, and I'll show you how to do that here in just a sec. Y equals a sine bx is how we write these equations when we're graphing them. The absolute value of a is your amplitude. 2 pi over b is your period. B is just the cycle. 1 over b is frequency. And this one's important, especially when we do some later on here. So if I'm graphing y equals sine x, my amplitude, so my amp, if you don't see it, it is 1. Period is 2 pi over 1 because b is 1. So my period is 2 pi. Cycle is 1 and frequency is 1. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and graph it at 0. So it's 0 right here. Remember your ordered pairs are cosine, sine. So the second number is my sine. So it's 0. My sine is 0. Pi halves, it's up at its amplitude, or it's up to 1. Okay, just remember up to its amplitude. At 180, we're at 0. So at pi, we're at 0. 3 pi halves, we're down here to the negative amplitude. To 2 pi, we're back to 0. So here comes my sine function. Okay, so there's the sine function. It's this nice little wave right here. So from here, from the start, we have how many cycles? 1. How many times does a cycle occur? 1. One complete period is at 2 pi. 2 pi. Amplitude is 1. Amplitude is 1. Okay, so that's how you do the basic sine graph. Okay, there's your basic sine graph. So let's say I now wanted to graph let's do this one here. I'm just going to come down like this. Okay, we'll do pi halves, pi, and these are the ones you're going to use all the time. Okay, let's say I wanted to graph y equals 2 sine 2x. No, you can't factor anything out of there. Okay, there's no factoring out. So, what is your amplitude? Your amplitude is 2. So that means it's going to go up. We'll just say that this is 2. And then this is going to be negative 2. Period is 2 pi over 2, which is pi. Cycle is 2. And your frequency is 1 over 2. Because this is your B and that's your A. So this is why I say this is important. These are my main points. Now, one thing about the sine function, it always starts at 0. So these are my main points that I am using. So whenever I find my frequency to figure out how my next up, because it starts down and then it goes up, intercept, down, intercept, up, that's how the pattern goes. So 1/2. I'm going to take my pi over 2. and I'm going to multiply it by that frequency. So my next number is going to be pi over 4. So at pi over 4, I'm going to have my maximum point. Okay, and I take my pi, and I multiply it by a half. So that means my intercept is now at pi halves. I'm going to take 3 pi halves, multiply it by that half, and I get 3 pi fourths. So here is going to be 3 pi fourths. So that's going to be my min. 2 pi times a half is going to be up here at pi. So here's one cycle. And if you look, the cycle to 2 pi, how many am I going to have? 2, so I'm going to have to complete it. One period ended at pi. Its frequency is every half unit. And its cycle is at 2. Okay, so that means I'm going to have how many cycles to 2 pi? 2. So my next one, remember it's halfway in between these. That's what these are looking like. So my next one is going to be halfway in between, so I'm just going to kind of spot it. And then I'm going to have an intercept. And I'm going to have another halfway in between. And then an intercept. So again, how many cycles did I have to 2 pi? 1, 2. How many times did each occur? Every half of a unit. Every half of a unit. This is half of pi halves. This is half of pi. This is half of 3 pi halves. Okay. My amplitude is at 2. Okay. And negative 2. So there is how you graph the sine function. Again, it always starts at 0. Make sure you labeled your frequency, and then you just multiply it to every single one of those numbers. And people ask me all the time, well, how do I know where pi fourths is? Well, if this is 1/2, technically, 1/4 is going to be in between 0 and a half. This is 1 technically. 3/4 is going to be between a half and 1. So on and so forth. Okay, so there's graphing the sine function. Don't overcomplicate it. Make sure you're writing the whole thing out so I can see your cycles. Make sure you're writing these numbers down so I can see what you multiplied by. And make sure you're writing all 4 of those. Okay, I want amplitude, period, frequency, and cycle. So there it is, the sine function. Tomorrow we'll do the cosine function.